Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our fourth annual Destination Cannabis webinar presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, also known as LIGHT, along with the Cannabis and Hemp Research Institute, both at Stockton University. My name is Jane Buchanevich, and I'm the faculty director of LIGHT. And our moderator today is Rob Mejia, and he is a teaching specialist in the Cannabis Studies Department. We're very excited about the webinar this year because for the first time it has a focus on Atlantic City's cannabis industry developments. As we go through the webinar, please type any questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what our expert panel has to say. So I'm just going to turn it over to Rob to get started right away. I hope you all enjoy the session.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. Surprising, this is our fourth year we've been doing this. So we have been talking about cannabis, hospitality, and tourism for quite some time. And we do appreciate the support that LIGHT has given us in promoting this event. Today, I am happy that we have three expert panelists with us, and they will all introduce themselves before they answer their first question. So let's go ahead and kick it off, and I will start with Brian Applegarth. Brian, how would you define cannabis, hospitality, and tourism, and what are the strongest trends that you noted this year?
All right, so how to define it and the strongest trends.
And introduce yourself first.
I will. Well, first off, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Rob. And thank you for being proactive in this conversation for years now. It's very important. So my name is Brian Applegarth. I've been working in cannabis travel and tourism since 2013. I am the founder of the Cannabis Travel Association International. And I was part of the first national study on the cannabis motivated travel audience in the United States. What is this audience? How do they self-describe? What's the size of it? What are the different archetypes? And most importantly, what motivates the destination decisions when they decide to travel, when they pick a destination because of access to cannabis experiences? What moves the needle when it comes to the cannabis travel audience in the United States today? I'm a consultant, so I get hired by destinations often, destination marketing organizations mostly, like Visit Atlantic City or San Francisco Travel or Visit Oakland, things like this. I've also done work for economic development, looking at the development of the visitor economy. So as we license the consumption of cannabis in today's world, how do we make sure that we're not only issuing licenses for cannabis shops and lounges, but also are we looking at that visitor ecosystem, the tourism centers, and making sure that we're building it out in a way that supports maximizing the economic impact from the visitor economy. As far as how I would define cannabis travel and tourism, for me, cannabis travel and tourism is at its most central anchored level, it's all about wellness and well-being, with 1 foot in medical travel, 1 foot in leisure travel. And of course, it also is important for group meetings and conferences, convention centers, all the B2B travel that happens as well, which has very strong economic impact. But yeah, I think cannabis travel is mostly well-being and wellness because the plant embodies that with homeostasis, and the biology of the plant is about balance and uplifting quality of life. So how do we create an environment that allows a plant to be accessible and expressed in its most optimized in the most authentic way of what the plant is capable of? As far as trends, I live out here in California, but I have worked with destinations on the East Coast as well as Canada. And as far as trends today, I think one of the most exciting trends, which also the data is showing, I've been again measuring the cannabis travel audience and their behaviors and habits and interests since 2019. And one of these trends that continues to grow is the awareness and the sophistication around cannabis as an enhancement tool to your travel vacation. And there's a trend in California called the effect pairing cannabis method that's happening, where people are looking at cannabis as a pre-travel activity, aperitif, so to speak, and they're looking at cannabis as an enhancement tool for an arts and culture experience or a culinary experience, and elevating and enhancing that experience with cannabis. We're also seeing a lot of more innovation in the lounges as far as programming, specifically stages, and how that's very different from bars. That live performance and the programming within a lounge, everything from like poetry to open mic nights to comedy, to burlesque shows and beyond. So you're seeing a lot of interesting kind of entertainment starting to unfold around this. And a lot of the lounges in California do have some sort of stage and kind of performance around that. And I think also the trends too are you have this kind of curious audience where people, when they are in a adult use legal market with lounges and really interesting experience centers with cannabis shops, perhaps infused culinary. But in this instance, the kind of curious audience, which is one of 4 archetypes, they want to go see. They look at a cannabis shop as an attraction. They want to go understand what it looks like today. It's almost like a novelty experience, and how to kind of meet those tourists where they're at and provide education and create awareness around all the different ways cannabis can be used today to have a great experience while on vacation, but also perhaps go away with a bit more knowledge of how to use cannabis and integrate it into your daily life, is something that we're seeing more of as well. So it's like cannabis, and again, it all ties back into wellness and well-being.
That is so interesting. And at one point, I hope we'll find out what the other 3 archetypes are, because anybody who's doing marketing in the cannabis hospitality and tourism arena will be very curious as to how to approach those different market segments.
Right.
So thank you for kicking us off. Let's go now to Christina. So Christina, as a current dispensary operator in Atlantic City, give us a sense of how your business is doing. And then can you tell us how you plan to leverage or get involved with cannabis hospitality and tourism?
Sure. First, I'm Christina Casile. Thank you for having me, Rob. I am CEO and one of the owners of Design 710. I am an interior designer by trade, and I'd worked in a multitude of different sectors, being healthcare, R&D, government, and sports and entertainment in my past life. And then in 2016, I was approached to enter into the cannabis space by who is my compliance officer, Ted Flowers, today. But he knew of my background and felt that it would be the perfect fit for designing cultivations, processing facilities, and dispensaries, as well as commercial kitchens. So we actually were successful with a couple clients. I've built out dispensaries in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. I've worked on a bunch of applications throughout the country for the application process. And then we actually did our own application in 2019, where we applied in New Jersey for the medical market. We waited 26 months and found out we won, which we were ecstatic about. And it took a little over a year to get all of our permitting and our building up and, finally getting our CO. We opened up for medical sales in 2023 and recreational sales right at the end of August of 2023. We're a genuine woman-owned business. I've been here from the inception of the company, and I continue to work in the day-to-day operations of the business. So to address your question of a sense of how our business is doing, again, we're a unique situation because we have medical and adult use customers. Opening first for the medical market, our priority is making sure that, they receive, great service and care available. And, our business has grown, in sales month after month. We expected a pretty large downturn coming into the off season, but the drop off was actually minimal. And we're already seeing a ramp up coming into the spring and summer months, which we're excited about. As far as how we plan to leverage or get involved with cannabis hospitality, Atlantic City sees about 20 to 30 million visitors a year. And actually, Atlantic City created this green zone, which encompasses Atlantic Ave, Pacific Ave, all the way down to the Showboat and a little bit past the Tropicana, which I think, in the future when people open up, I think is going to be a big tourist draw in the area into the city. One thing that we pride ourselves on is, which we've done since day one, is creating an experience for our customers. If you're a experienced user or someone that, has never touched it, we wanted you to be able to come into our dispensary and feel comfortable and safe. And, our bud tenders are extremely well educated and passionate about the market. They've all, been in the cannabis world for a couple years, and they just create this experience that helps navigate people through buying product and suggestions of what they should however they want to feel or purchase. They're there to help. It is a little difficult with the casinos and their affiliated hotels not being able to really engage in the market because of it not being federally regulated. So we've taken the approach of partnering up with some local restaurants and bars and clubs and kind of cross-promoting and cross-marketing our way, to draw people into the dispensary that way. We're also really proud of our partnership with the Union Hall Arts. We have local artists that display their art in our dispensary that we rotate through, and always welcoming new art in there for people to come see. And people have actually come back to, they like that feature about the dispensary, and they come back to see what's there. We also have live music from time to time. We've got a couple musicians in our staff that like to play at the dispensary. But again, just given that the federal status of marijuana and the strict regulations and against advertising and marketing, you just have to be really strategic and creative about how, you drive people into your store.
Very good. All right, let's turn over to John Cohn. So, John, your major cannabis operation in Atlantic City will be multifaceted. Can you tell us about your plans for the different parts of your operation? I know they're pretty extensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess first off, my name's John Cohn, founder of Agrikind. We were a Pennsylvania-based medical operator, originally just a wholesale and manufacturer. Then we went on to win one of the 8 clinical registrant licenses as well in PA. So believe very deeply in the medical, and to Brian's point, really sort of even in the adult use segment, the wellness and really the therapeutic end of the cannabis market. And even coming into Atlantic City under very much a different business strategy, being tourism driven, it still kind of retains the same foundation that we had as a company that we started in PA as purely medical, meaning that we believe very strongly in the desires of the patient or the consumer, whichever the case is. So being efficacy centric, consumer centric, and that goes all the way to experience. So while we did sell our plant touching operations in Pennsylvania to Verano, we kept our clinical registrant interactions, our management service agreement with Drexel. We've got 5 clinical trials underway right now on people, couple in petri dishes and on mouse models, but really, and kept our names, our brands, our patents, and our trademarks. So what we're looking to do in Atlantic City is take it from a purely medical audience to very much a consumer and tourist-based audience. And not so much, and to Christina's point also, I think last year AC brought in roughly 27 to 28 million visitors. And we see those numbers inching back up. I think they're just at or above pre-COVID numbers now, and we expect to see those climbing over the next few years. And not so much from casino growth, because it's not growing. With the online casinos, with other states opening up casinos, the heads of the casinos are telling us that they're looking for other things to bring businesses into the city. Not businesses, but people and consumers into the city. So we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in conventions, a little bit of an uptick in certainly cannabis focused tourism. The green zone is, I think, would definitely help that. And there are some facilities that are zoned outside of the green zone as well. So I really do think that AC is well underway to becoming the East Coast cannabis capital. That, you know, the mayor that we about 3 years ago when we discussed coming into the city, that was the vision that the mayor and Cash McGinley had conveyed. And so back to what we're looking to do. We have a dispensary. Our grand opening will be 4/20 at the Claridge Casino floor, the old casino floor. We converted the 10,000 square foot space into a dispensary and a consumption lounge. About 6,500 square feet will be the store. The other 3,500 will be back office and the consumption lounge. We did build it with a built-in audio-visual system. We could support up to 3-piece band without any additional equipment other than mics, and have enough room for a 5-piece, although the lounge isn't that big, so I'm not sure we can squeeze it in. It's gonna be a little touch and go. But we definitely expect programming such as jazz nights, comedy club nights, maybe a karaoke night. We have the ability to close off the lounge and rent it out as a private club, or have it open attached. It is attached to the dispensary. It's also accessible via elevator directly off Indiana Avenue. So it's kind of a hybrid of an indoor-outdoor, if you will. The lounge itself is indoor, but if we were to close it off, it can be leased out as a private venue. So, you know, the tourism and the dispensary aspect is one element of it, and you know, we really look to evolve with the regulations in New Jersey, because as many people know, you can't sell food, you can't sell drinks, and you know, while you can bring them in, or in our case, we're going to do a hybrid model where we serve them, but it's going to be Claridge room service that actually serves them. But that'll be somewhat seamless to the customer, because we'll have kiosks in the lounge where they can actually order, and that food and drink will be brought to them. But unfortunately, that doesn't help our business model so much. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship with Claridge and some other areas that we've been, but we kind of have a cannabis consumer roadmap developed with them that we're continuing to discuss and work through. And as the regs change and expand, we're looking to do some kind of very specific and kind of, as Christina said, sort of creative approaches to make cannabis consumption more friendly in the hotel. Now, the advantage of Claridge is they used to have a casino license, but they don't anymore. So while they're attached to Bally's via catwalk, they don't have a gaming license, which does make some of the programs that we're looking to do with them far more feasible. But you know, it is a little bit of a, given that it's such an early industry, the lounge aspects, at least in New Jersey, and nationwide, it's a pretty early industry. We'd expect to see an awful lot of change and maturation to those regulations over time. On the other side, we're building cultivation and manufacturing also in downtown city. So we've got 2 blocks inland from the Claridge. We bought a 4-acre site on Atlantic Avenue, experienced a number of environmental issues. Without going into a lot of detail, we hit 13 underground storage tanks after we had our phase 2s done. So needless to say, we've been doing a lot of cleanup for the past 9 to 12 months. But in tandem, we had acquired a parcel right across from the convention center at 1810 Baltic Avenue. And that's being built out as an interim grow for us. So that'll be a 20,000 square foot facility, about 80% done with construction. So we look to have first seeds in the ground roughly May 1st timeframe, with product coming out prior to the end of the summer. So schedule is certainly been slipping over time, and I'm sure Christina can attest to the challenges to getting operational in New Jersey and specifically Atlantic City. And for no other reason than there's just a lot of approvals needed. And, you know, where AC has multiple municipalities with PRDA in the city, it just makes things take longer. But we're finally there. We're finally over most of the hurdles. And that interim grow is really just going to produce flower and flower-based products. We're in the midst of looking at an interim manufacturing facility as well. We may build that at Baltic, or we may actually have that our first release at the larger Atlantic project property. But I know where the loaded question is, Rob, is it on the phase 2 and phase 3 for that project? And at Atlantic Ave, we've got designed a 77,000 square foot footprint for our cultivation manufacturing facility. But it's going to have 130,000 square feet, assuming all 5 phases get implemented. And phase 3 of that building is actually a 17,000 square foot museum, tour track event center, where it'll actually be open to the public. And it's completely segregated from the grow. Everything's behind glass. It's actually going to have a different address tied to the same building, but it's a condo. And it really is designed to not tie into the tourism that's coming into Atlantic City, but to try to really generate additional tourism and bring people into the city to be, to see something different that is new to the market. It really hasn't been out there before. There is a museum that opened in New York City not too long ago, and I haven't had a chance to visit it yet. But I understand it's just a museum. It's not tied to a grow or manufacturer. So the tour of the facility doesn't exist. And we thought it'd be kind of interesting to not just have memorabilia and pop-ups and those capabilities, but to have something where people can really see, how the donuts are made. And that's kind of the vision. But where we came in and we built the company in Pennsylvania very rapidly and sold it far quicker than we ever anticipated. We didn't have the business plan to do that in PA either, but in Jersey, we specifically wanted to spend more time, build it out more stepwise, I guess in a more stepwise fashion. But I think just the lack of capital available to markets, the increased time it takes to get operational, it's probably going to even elongate that further, as opposed to looking to buy it, sell it, and flip it, which is kind of the antithesis of what we're trying to do.
Right. Well, thank you for that vision of all the things you're doing. It's definitely an ambitious plan. And as you know, I am very excited about the museum. I think there's a lot of things you can do with that. And then also just having that education component. There are so many people who really want to see the plant. They want to see how it's grown. They want to see how it's processed. They're so intrigued by that I think that you will have a very enthusiastic audience that will come there. So let's turn over to Christina again. So Christina, who are your main customers and what have you learned from them? And then do you note a big difference between local customers and tourists who come into Atlantic City, either from other parts of New Jersey or from even from other states?
Sure. I mean, our main customers are patients and individuals that live and work in AC, whether it be the casinos, hotels, bars, etc., and just on the outskirts of the city. I mean, whether they're local or not local, most people are looking for quality product at, good prices. We see a lot of people from PA, New York, Delaware, Maryland. Surprisingly, we see a lot of people from Texas, the Carolinas, and Ohio as well, pretty regularly. We also having a diverse menu, and a full inventory has been essential for us. For in-state and our patients, we carry grower like Breakwater that you can only get in New Jersey, which draws people to, we are the only Southern dispensary that carries them. And then as far as tourists, again, aside from having good product, our bud tenders, point them in the right direction. Again, they come in there asking a ton of questions, not knowing Jersey products. And so we rely, heavily on our bud tenders to be educated and, point them in the right direction for what they're looking for.
And can you remind the audience if New Jersey does recognize medical cannabis cards from other states? So if I have a medical cannabis card from another state, can I come into a New Jersey dispensary as a medical patient?
They do not, although reciprocity would be amazing.
Yeah,
Particularly for people coming on vacation, down the shore towns. I mean, if they could bring their medical card, because there's products that we have specifically for medical patients. So
sure.
yeah, that'd be great, but no, it's not allowed right now.
Of course, they can buy as adult patients, but then of course there are taxes and different pricing structures. So let's turn over to Brian now. So in past webinars, I've heard you share some statistics about how cannabis hospitality and tourism drives business. What important data should we be paying attention to now?
I mean, I go directly to the most recent, every year since, so 2019, we had the foundational data set at the national level for the cannabis travel audience. And again, this is the active leisure travel audience, the United States. The cannabis travel audience is about 37% of that, which equates to about 72 million Americans that are expecting to have at least one cannabis experience while on vacation. And then under that, there's four archetypes. There's the cannabis connoisseur, the cannabis wellness traveler, the cannabis, and then the ceremonial traveler, which is really exciting too, because we are starting to dip into entheogenic effects and this transformative travel vertical. And everybody in this room understands that cannabis is very different than the intoxicating elements of liquor, so to speak. So understanding how people can use cannabis in more of a ceremony and ritual way and really develop that well-being vertical in travel is a really, really kind of innovative frontier space. So understanding the size of the audience and the archetypes and what motivates their travel. To John's point, he was talking about being a destination driver versus being an add-on to a itinerary, right? So I really loved hearing the vision of having, manufacturing cultivation and making that an attraction, right? It's thinking in terms of this attraction. Just an interesting case study is Lagunitas is a brewing company out here in California in Santa Rosa. They have quite the operation going when it comes to welcoming visitors onto their manufacturing site. And they put through about 30,000 people a year that become walking, talking billboards and evangelists. And they sell a lot of merchandise. They have a restaurant on site. You're buying into a culture. And it's really fascinating to see them turn, using travel and tourism, leveraging that into really being an attraction for the area, which then opens up all the relationships with hotels and airports and rental car companies and the entire ecosystem, including destination marketing organizations. I think that's one thing that goes often overlooked is if you do invest in a real way into being a part of the visitor economy, the partnership opportunities are significant. And I think it will continue to differentiate the establishments and the brands that kind of invest in that. Really from this past, so since 2019, we set that foundation, and then every year we do a research in summer and have a new set of data come out on how the audience is evolving. And I kind of alluded to this when I was speaking previously, but this concept of really attributing cannabis as a pairing mechanism to an arts and culture experience. So prior to going to the MoMA or whatever the significant kind of arts and culture stakeholders are in your destination in Atlantic City, visiting a dispensary and lounge prior to that and consuming a cannabis beverage or smoking a joint or whatever the medium is, with a specific terpene profile and chemical composition and dosing level that is a precursor to that arts and culture experience is a really interesting data point that really kind of shined in this past study in July 2023. It's really exciting because the visitor economy and travel economy stakeholders really value the capability of moving a visitor throughout the ecosystem. So yeah, we love that you're an attraction, but how do you curate and connect with spreading that economic impact out throughout the destination? So I think that this data point is really important for brands and establishments to follow and track, because when you sit down with the travel industry stakeholders, they're going to immediately see the value when you're not only showing them the size of the audience, the archetypes of the audience, but how you can literally be a pivot point to sending that visitor to spend money in different locations. And yet again, another data point of this was looking at cannabis as the new vermouth, like a precursor to a Michelin star meal, right? A little appetite stimulant, accentuate flavor, taste, texture. And so now what used to be the munchies became a frontline medicinal application during the AIDS epidemic. And then I think version 3.0 is cannabis as a precursor to a Michelin star meal in travel, and not just smoking. I think that smoking and inhalation sometimes drown out the room. I think that we really need to understand cannabis's capability of being a spa, being a beverage bar, being an infused culinary experience above and beyond a candy and an edible. and as well as cannabis events, right? And again, that dips into the industry side, the B2B conferences and conventions and group meetings. So yeah, I would say the data to understand most recently is that connective tissue of how these cannabis experience centers, that's another word that came up, with John and Christina, is the travel industry really does consider itself the experience economy, right? It's this experience curation. And then of course you have the visitor or the tourist track, and then the tourist information outposts or the centers where you have tourist information offices. So really understanding that ecosystem of travel within your greater destination and how you fit and become one of the adopted kind of preferred partners of that greater ecosystem, and you maximize those partnerships, and then really dig in on that data side with that tourist spend, which the psychology obviously behind when in Rome, when you're on vacation versus a resident spend that might be more price conscious, is very real. So then it becomes, how do you unlock and maximize the spend in a way that really is about placemaking and ties into the brand of the destination. So understanding the brand, and I was looking this up before the gathering today, this webinar, and just a couple of years ago, Atlantic City has a very specific kind of brand, right? So understanding how you fit into that, so you continually are able to reflect back to the travel industry that you are not just a cannabis retail shop or cannabis lounge, or cannabis consumption space, as I prefer to say, because it gives that air with spas and wellness centers and beverage bars and things. But you consider yourself an attraction and an experience creator that is part of a greater puzzle of a 360 itinerary, when somebody's in town. So yeah, that connective tissue, I think, to arts and culture, culinary. Also, we see consistently with the cannabis motivated travel audience, their appetite to be in nature, so natural settings and be outdoors. I don't think any of us are surprised by that. They also definitely consider themselves sustainable minded. This is the trend that we see in the data is they consider themselves low impact, sustainable minded travelers. So then it becomes, okay, well, if you're welcoming somebody to a facility like John's, is there a hook in there that talks about a give back, element and touches in on that self-identification of being a sustainable traveler? So you can reinforce that, as they come to your destination. So those kind of strategies.
I think it's so interesting. If you look at sort of where we started 4 years ago, I don't think we were really talking about this ecosystem. It was more individual parts of the puzzle, but I
Mhm.
feel like it's coming together in more of a cohesive experience. And certainly people are looking for experiences over goods in many ways. But I like the way that you're talking about it and the opportunities that you can go in so many different directions, especially if you know who your consumers are. So let's pivot here for a moment. And this is a question for any and all of you. And I need to give just a little bit of quick background. So right now, New Jersey is in the process of allowing for social consumption lounges, which have to be attached to or on the same grounds as a dispensary. Also, food and beverage is not allowed to be sold in a lounge, and customers can even bring in their own cannabis products. So how do you think operators can still make money? And what are the best practices you've noted regarding consumption lounges? And then this is sort of a little sub question for Brian. What can New Jersey learn from other states who already have consumption lounges up and running? So who would like to go for that first? I get so many questions from people who say, "Yeah, I'd like to do a lounge, but how am I going to make any money?"
I'll
I
jump
mean,
in. Oh, go
okay.
ahead, Christina, please.
But no, I was just gonna say that, we discuss this all the time, actually. We've got, 8,000 square feet of space adjacent to us that we talk about building a lounge, but, we talk all the time about how to monetize it. Unless you are, charging a cover or, running it as a private club or, we just, I have personally haven't seen, a great example of, how to, because you can't sell food, you can't sell beverages, you can't do these things. So it's still kind of difficult, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd have to second that from Christina. We're doing it to really be, I don't want to call it to be I don't expect us to be categorized as a loss leader for long, but we're really doing it without expectation of revenue, positive cash flow coming from the lounge in the near term, and really more positioning for the belief that at some point, at least non-alcoholic beverage sales will be allowed, probably food of some sort. You know, we were told early on that through different regulators and so forth that they try to mirror wineries and microbrews, but the truth is they sell food, right? Especially microbrews originally couldn't sell, then they were able to sell pretzels and things like that. Now, often full restaurants. So we do anticipate the regs to change to make it more equitable and to drive, to get people to do it, frankly. Excuse me. But so in anticipation of it, when we built our lounge, we built an entire bar. It's a full wet bar. Day one, we're going to give soda away. We're not going to be selling anything there. And all other drinks and beverages or food will come from the Claridge room service. But over time, the hope is that we would change that. Alternatively, there are ways to monetize now. I mean, we're using the Claridge room service because it's there. But who's to say that we couldn't open up another rental space in the hotel, have our own restaurant, and then deliver it up? And that's allowed. Food court model, food court concept, that's allowed. So back to the creativity. I mean, if you want to get in really early, I think you have to be creative about it, and have augmented business plans that'll let you survive the storms. I had visited New Woo. I think it's Sky Top Lounge. Maybe Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in Vegas. It's been open for a while. Those who read about Vegas news and legislation, I heard like they just licensed the first lounge about a month ago, but it didn't count the lounges that are on the Indian reservations, and that happens to be one of them. And it's an interesting model. They have a very large outdoor venue. I want to say 20, 30,000 square feet, where they have giant music acts Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. Then they have a nice indoor lounge upstairs, which again is a violation of New Jersey regs. You're only allowed one lounge. Doesn't make it have 3 dispensaries, but only one lounge. So, again, we hope to see that change because again, what's the reason for it? And a lot of times the regs will come out and have a specific restriction because of something that they don't know how to manage, or they just don't want to, it could be too much. One of the reasons I understood for food and drink in Jersey was that gets into the whole Department of Health regulations and doesn't fall under the CRC. So the CRC, Cannabis Regulatory Commission, is a relatively new organization, kind of, getting grounded. I think once they become more mature, and I should note that the original medical program was overseen by the Department of Health, like it often is. So I think the transition that control out to get their own regulatory body in place probably becomes easier if you're separate from the DOH, right? And then as you start to move forward, the two organizations may work more closely together. And just again, my opinion on this, but I just think that they're walking before they run, which does make some sense. But on the cannabis operator side, it does make it very challenging, if not impossible, to monetize. And when I say it, you could always generate some revenue, right? You could DoorDash model. They charge a fee to bring the food in or to deliver the food. But then again, from a profitability standpoint, I don't think the margins justify the rents that we'll be paying for our lounge. So I think it's really gonna be something that's more national, and where, just like the regulations changed with cannabis throughout different states, where Oregon didn't used to test at all. Now they're one of the most stringent testers in terms of potency and microbials and what have you. There's this give and take or yin and yang in the market that I think things sort of normalize over time. And I think honestly, it's going to be a question of how quickly the regs change and how much influence the regulators see from other states to make it more of an interest for operators to.
And particularly in Atlantic City, I remember the Cannabis Commission, NAC, talking about that. Forgive me, I don't remember the percentage. It's somewhere between 20 and 30% of areas in AC allow smoking. So they're looking for lounges because, you know, you can't smoke in, you know, some of the casinos anymore or hotel rooms or things like that. So they're really actually encouraging lounges down there because it gives people a place to go and smoke or, you know, use whatever form of marijuana they want. So AC is really actually encouraging them down there.
I think, well, the first thing, I can repeat it, is I think that, I think it's important as we move forward to really think in terms of consumption spaces versus lounges, right? So, and, you know, Rob, one of the models in California is we're seeing these cannabis spas where you literally have a treatment center, you have your own private masseuse, you're picking a topical based on going in there. There were also a couple other lounges, and they're not stood up yet and opened, but that were approved in West Hollywood that were very much wellness centers with sound baths, kind of this model. So I think, you know, that story of that specific, obviously that's spa treatments, that's bookings, that's $100 fees for masseuse. It shows that being able to expand that thought beyond lounges and smoking and inhalation of any kind, and also knowing the nuance and difference between smoking and vaping, right? It's different kind of combustion levels. And there is a large demographic where as we tip into beverages and edibles it's making that room for people that don't want to be around smoke, that want to be able to go to a cannabis bar and drink a beverage without being around smoke and vape, because there's a stigma for them or they just don't like the smell or whatever it is. Again, I think it's at the end of the day, that's accessibility and meeting this new audience as it evolves and having that vision to, I think, capture what I believe is going to be kind of a growing wave of consumers that don't prefer to inhale, right? So having those consumption spaces. As far as you know, I think looking at that intersection of travel, right? So the intersection of cannabis experience creation and the travel and tourism economy. Let's talk about two kind of bookends. You know, the first one, let's talk about in California, and this happens in other markets as well. There's this history, there's legacy. Something that I've been working on for years at this point, which is kind of part of that, is a project called the Cannabis Trail, and it's a 9-county trail with about 20 cultural landmarks that celebrate the cannabis legalization movement. And if you travel the trail, you visit lounge. There's about 5-6 lounges. There's some of the coolest shops with ocean views off the Mendocino coast. You go to these interactive lounges that have a whole wall of screens where it's like built to be an entertainment venue, where when you step into it, it's like dim lights, big screens. They bring in marketplaces. So you're starting to see this innovation, that innovative frontier. But if you travel this cannabis trail, you also visit these landmarks. Now, if you look at the data, if you do have a landmark designation or are recognized as a cultural landmark, it translates to an uptick. If you market it correctly, it translates into an uptick in foot traffic through travel. People seek out these kind of experiences. So the cultural landmarks along the trail, each one has a map. They literally, you know, here are the cultural landmarks, if you can see it. And they celebrate the history, the pioneers, the storytelling of the cannabis movement. And each one has a QR code where you can link out and listen to an audio podcast and hang out in a lounge, indoor or outdoor, smoke a joint that's locally grown, and listen to the Back to the Land movement and how the hippies moved up north and created intentional communities and grew pot, you know, and what that means for the industry today. So I think understanding the history and the historical cultural context is an interesting strategy. And the data shows that you can pull in, I think it's like 20% more foot traffic if you're marketing as a cultural landmark. On that effect pairing side, it's exciting. I just finished up a curriculum for a university out here in California that is a cannabis tourism, travel, and hospitality curriculum. And part of that is this effect pairing concept with these infographics. Now, why I speak to this is, you know, the way that this is developing is really a lounge program where now you can communicate with the destination marketing organization and talk about how on Friday and Saturday nights you have a trained staff person that can welcome visitors and look at their itinerary and be pairing cannabis with whatever they have on the docket while they're in town. So then you're pushing sell through plus perhaps pairing something with whatever activity they're doing that day or that evening. So it's kind of this call to action yet again of like placemaking and having a story to tell a visitor that, and I think you could charge for that is what I'm getting at. It's like, you know, if you have that run in a really special way with seasonal features and you're featuring this restaurant or this art experience and these kind of products, you know, this effect pairing concept of telling a story about the destination that is cannabis forward, I think is another strategy. Um, I think obviously renting out the room, like John mentioned, where you can close it off and you can bring in, you know, private parties and things like that, and having a nice marketing strategy. Again, I think creating massive awareness with that, with the travel economy is important. I think that, you know, people want to go in and experience these cannabis spaces. And I have a few destination clients here in California that, you know, they welcome groups and conferences, and it could be the Dentists of America or whatever, but they have some really great large attraction style shops where we can host groups of 40. And it could be part of those adjacent experiences while on the destination that are really unique and special. And again, that travel economy will support that because you're bringing in economic impact, right? So I think the other one that comes up for me is in California now, we and beyond, but it was born in California as this cannabis sommelier certification. It's called the Congier. And I went through it, and I'm one of, there's about 220 globally now. But I do think there's an opportunity to have and invest in having a staff member or two with this kind of credential of being a certified cannabis sommelier. And what does that look like if somebody books a 90-minute experience at a very dedicated table where it's a curated 90-minute immersive cannabis rich experience with a sommelier walking you through cannabis and how that works? And again, what kind of revenue does that translate to, and what kind of packages do you have? So I mean, and I think as a last comment, you know, as you look at your consumption spaces and how to really drive revenue, um, really just experimenting, right? And following what works, what doesn't, and figuring out, you know, which models fit your clientele. Like, who do you want to meet and who do you want to attract? One thing's for certain, is having a very strong strategy to do proactive outreach and become one of the 2 or 3 businesses that are top of mind for the visitor economy stakeholders is step one. And you know, and bring data, bring case studies, you know, that education, data, and case study, the trifecta of becoming the trusted source of information in your market for your visitor economy stakeholders is step one. And then you're going to have these funnels that are there to try to support your success because you have that vision of placemaking and working with that visitor ecosystem in a brand aligned way. You know, at the end of the day, the DMOs, one thing that's very specific they do is brand management, and anything that touches their brand they care about. So I guarantee you there's people at Atlantic City that, what is the cannabis sub brand today? And it may be, you know, what are those pillars? What are the stories we're telling that are totally aligned with the Visit Atlantic City team?
Yeah, fascinating how things have evolved, and that trail sounds intriguing. Someday I would absolutely love to do that. That sounds like such a good education and such a hands-on experience that really sounds like it would be something I would hope we can duplicate here in New Jersey at some point. So we got a question in the chat that's a kind of a difficult question. So I'll see if you all are willing to answer it. And that is, the person wants to know how much money dispensaries make. Before I ask you that question, I will preface it and say that by the time somebody goes through the application process, by the time they hire attorneys, consultants, accountants, by the time you do the build out, you are into a big mountain of debt normally before you do that. So it does often take dispensaries at least 2 years before they even break even. So I will preface my comments with that, and then I'll ask the panelists if they are willing to disclose any figures.
I can start, and Christina can certainly chime in after. We had 6 in Pennsylvania. I think four were open before we stopped operating. And it could be anywhere from negative 50% return on investment to 22 to 23% margin. And really, it had a lot to do with the size of the store, the obviously, like Rob said, the amount of money you put into it to build the store out. We've seen some that have opened with $180,000 of investment. I can name one in Maryland that they had card tables that they served on, and the store's packed. I mean, they have to say they make a fortune. Our store, High Rollers, we spent in excess of $4 million on fitting that out. So the ROI is going to be every minute of 2 years, likely, to Rob's point. But it really has a lot to do with location, how many people you can put through the store a day, what your average ticket is, and what your margins are. The standard average in many states is 100% markup for the dispensary. But that being said, there's constantly promotions and sales and other things that chip away at that markup. And while 100%, that's actually pretty standard for any retail business, wholesale to retail. What people don't know a lot about is 280E, which is the IRS code that prevents cannabis businesses from writing off any expenses other than cost of goods sold prior to paying their taxes. So what it means is we're taxed on gross, we're not taxed on net. And it's a huge disadvantage, which is kind of ironic, but the only thing you're allowed to write off essentially is the cost of the federally legal cannabis. You can't write off the labor, your labor, your lights, your rent. So because of that, even at a relatively high margin, your EBITDA margin might be 40% or 35% or 30%, your actual net profit, was very, very tight. And as the markets mature, cost of cannabis drops. I mean, the prices drop, the cost drops, but so does the average ticket. So as a result, it becomes even more and more challenging for the dispensaries to make money. So I can tell you, we had some in PA that were profitable, and we had some that actually weren't profitable. And as the markets, expand over time, and you get more supply with the demand being satisfied, those margins become even tighter.
And Christina, what can you add? What's your take?
I mean, I agree with everything that John had said. I mean, it all depends too, are you doing a micro? Are you doing what's the size of, the dispensary that you're working with? How many POSs are you going to have? Do you just have 3? Do you have 13? The build outs, obviously going to be more expensive, for, a bigger dispensary versus a micro. So, it all depends on, what you're looking to do.
Okay. And also the one thing I can tell you is if you're good at math, you can actually look at the taxes that the dispensary paid into the township, and you can backtrack and you can find out exactly what they made during the year. So switching things just a little bit, Christina, what cannabis hospitality and tourism events have you ever personally witnessed or participated in, if you're comfortable talking about that? And what was your experience, or what would you like to experience?
Sure. I mean, one of them that I always laugh about, I went to Cannabis out in Spain, Barcelona. And again, I went to Barcelona to, this conference. And, prior to, I had been to MJ Biz, and, I went and everyone's in suits and, dressed very formally. So I thought, I'm going to go to Cannabis and dress the same way. Well, they pretty much thought we were narcs walking into this event, because it was it was all concerts and people having a good time, and a ton of booths, and the event was amazing. Barcelona was amazing, but clearly I did do enough research before I went. But yeah, I mean, that's one that impressed me. There was a ton of information, ton of booths there, but
Did you happen to go to any of the lounges that they have there?
I did
Because
not. I didn't.
Spain does have consumption lounges. So I went to one called HQ,
Okay.
middle of downtown. It's one of the high level ones. Very
Okay.
interesting, because you have to, well, first of all, somebody has to sponsor you from the club.
Okay.
And then you have to have your passport. They take a photograph of you. There's a whole room before you get in there. And in the room, they take your photo, they check your credentials and all that. And then you actually have to put money on a card. So you almost have like a debit card because you can't spend
Okay.
any money in the facility. So you put your money in there and say you have X number of dollars you can spend. And then when you go in, the first floor had a library, it had a pool table, it had a very small bar area where it had a couple beers. I think there was one or two selections of wine. It was mostly water and soda. And then they had a few snacks. They were mostly prepackaged munchies. So it was a little bag of pastries and little cookies and that kind of stuff. Nothing particularly healthy there. Um, but at any rate, so they had the pool table, they had the library, and then you went downstairs. And downstairs, they had all these tables, and each table had a little rolling tray. They had ashtrays. They had a bunch of different rolling papers. One very good touch that just cracked me up was that they actually had lighters that were Velcroed onto the bar, literally hundreds of them. So when you were done with the lighter, you would go back there and you would put it back on your Velcro strip so that you would never run out of a lighter. You could also use things like a volcano there, or you could just use a bong for free. And there were people playing board games. People came in to do work. So I saw some people with their computers that were there the whole time I was there, just banging away on their computers. Some people came in during lunch, rolled a quick joint, had a joint. They were out of there in 10 minutes. A lot of couples, again, board games. There was pinball. There was a movie screen. There was some very light music playing in the background. But the way they made money is they actually had a couple dispensary windows that were downstairs. So you took your card and that's where you purchased, and they only had two choices. You could either have several choices of flour, or they also had hash, since they're close to Morocco, and Spain is very much a hash culture, and hash actually is just concentrated cannabis in the simplest explanation. So at any rate, so you would go there, you would actually buy the product, use the product there, and then and move along. But it was very quiet, it was very enjoyable, and it very just chill. I would describe it. So what an interesting experience. So another question for everybody is, what are the future prospects for the development and enjoyment of the cannabis hospitality and tourism industry?
I'm excited about the integration of cannabis into hotels and resorts, most specifically. The Cannabis Travel Association International, we've run our third year kind of running a bill that is a cannabis catering license. So we looked at the alcohol license of catering and how can a cannabis catering license come to life that allows for a very relatable and similar pathway where hotels and resorts could really integrate cannabis into weddings, events, groups, conferences on site. So I think the next level of maturity in travel and tourism, integrating and having a specific kind of license and pathway that can really engage like in California, the travel industry is a $140 billion industry. The cannabis is $6 billion, right? Somehow start like fueling normalization by getting integrated into these pre-established industries. I think that's going to be where things really exponentially grow, is the cross-industry strategies. So I'm excited about that kind of new frontier that we get closer and closer to.
And Christina and John, what are you most excited about?
I would say the same. And it's the integration of cannabis throughout many lifestyle events. I mean, one of the key reasons we went to Atlantic City was, it's kind of got everything Vegas has plus water. And, it needs a draw. People want, the city wants to bring it back for different business purposes. So I really think the mix of cannabis and comedy clubs, cannabis spas, I mean, all the hotels have spas for the most part down there. And I just think making it a core part of everyone's life. Not everyone's, but the people that come and want to be consumers, and the four more categories that Brian brings up. I think there's a lot of draw for each and every one of them. And especially the one where you're on vacation and do in Rome. I mean, that's, AC's kind of been known for that to a degree. And I think we do get a lot of conventions in every year, and being able to just mix and match and tie that integration together it's great for the consumer, it's great for the businesses, and it's really good for the city.
And Christina, what are you most excited about?
I actually like the adventure things. I was reading about, zip line tours over grows and things like that. I mean, when I go away, I'm adventurous, so I like, doing those, types of things, but I think that they'd be really cool.
I have seen some sporting events too. I mean, they basically have a 420 Olympics in Colorado, and certainly I know a lot of people who work out who use cannabis before their workouts and often after their workouts too for recovery. So I do think there's a nice, interesting niche there as well. Here's one question I would like to pose to you from the audience, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So the question is, there's a private chef who is looking to bring their culinary skills to the cannabis stage in Atlantic City, and they want to know if that's if they can do that anywhere in a private setting.
Actually, I just typed in the answer to that, so I'll take
Okay.
the first shot. But it's something we've been approached about and actually intend on doing. So there's two sides to it. There's the cannabis regulatory side, then there's the food side, right? What we found, I mean, the regs state that consumption can occur anywhere in a private setting. So as long as it's not public, the answer is yeah, you can do it. What you can't do though is sell it. So you can gift cannabis. An individual is allowed to purchase 28 grams a day, and I forget whether it's 5 or 6 ounces that they're allowed to possess for a max. So in theory, an individual could buy an ounce and gift. Is it 6, Rob?
Yeah.
A person could buy an ounce and gift a gram to 28 people and be completely within the regulations. The food service side becomes a little bit more stringent though. So in Jersey, and we've researched this recently, you can be a cottage food provider, which would, I guess the example would be, you go into a gas station and you buy prepackaged coffee cake that's sitting on the counter that, a family down the street baked a whole bunch of and distributed. It's kind of like, small business. The limit on that is $50,000 a year of revenue that you're allowed to make. If you exceed that, you get into different classes of Department of Health licensing around food. So, there's to the point of if you're creative and, maybe you can go to a restaurant that's normally closed on a Tuesday night and piggyback off of their food service license. And then on the other side of it, come up with creative ways to distribute cannabis, then yeah, there are actually effective ways to do it. It's not something that's been very, given the mix of food and cannabis doesn't really exist yet in Jersey. It's not something that's that the pathway is paved for yet.
One thing I do think may happen is New York has catering licenses that will be available, and we'll see how those play out. And certainly, I think those will be successful, and also their temporary licenses for festivals and things like that. I do think that once New York gets a little further along in their industry, I think that New Jersey will have I bet we'll be following that model. And I do love that it would open up opportunities exactly for these small operators that could provide a real high level boutique experience.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I will let Jane wrap us up because I see that we are actually at time.
Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for facilitating such an informative panel. And thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences. I want to wish Christina and John a lot of success in your business ventures. I think it's an exciting thing for Atlantic City. And thank you to our audience for staying with us. And we do send out a survey at the end. I hope you will fill it out to give us some feedback on future events. So thank you all and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.